Any discussion? Call the question.
Six yes. Pulled item is number 4, Mr. Chairman. That is an appropriation and budget amendment for 6 additional fire rescue personnel to assure base level staffing at Fire Rescue Station 5.
Yes, thank you. My question is, not that this is not needed, but it is outside of budget. And I did read the material, but I think it's important for people to understand how we're going to be paying for this, plus how this all automatically increases the baseline budget for next year with the addition of 6 new firefighters. Also, I do think that this is a great example of how we need to have a robust strategic plan to deal with these items as they come down the pike. We already have a budget this year that some positions were funded half year. Other things just weren't funded. We talked about county employee raises, doing it in 2 years or 3 years, and that would mean an extra $500,000 to $1 million next year. So all these items coupled together affect the budget for next year, and I think it's important for our citizens to understand that, that when those budgets come due, there's already built-in increases to them. So if, Mr. Taylor, if you could explain quickly just how the new firefighters are going to be paid for and how that will affect the budget next year, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I understand. Well, as stated in the item, the admin and finance have recommended that $316,000, a bit over $316,000 in overtime cost be funded with available general fund balance as a one-time cost to pay overtime necessary to fill the gap to provide this staff. This is one-time funding that will not be incurred for this purpose again in FY19, so it's appropriate as a one-time use. And though the budget had been finalized for 18, we've reviewed the compensation board reports and expect an increase of $257,000 from the comp board in ongoing state revenue. So we can anticipate that extra, which would more than cover the nearly $190,000 in ongoing additional expense.
All right, thank you. And then what does that leave in our fund balance?
Bonnie? Oh, $6.8 million
In the fund balance?
in the fund balance.
Well, I mean, this is where we're taking the money out of, is the fund balance to pay for that, since it's one time?
Well, we're taking, yes, we're going to take a little over $316,000.
Okay, and so just to be clear, that budget or that fund is the one that we just set up a couple years ago. Is that correct?
No, this is our year-end, this is taking the money out of the year-end balance at the end of FY17.
Right. In the third quarter report, we reported that we estimated a undesignated fund balance of $7.1 million after all of the reserves had already been funded at the levels approved by the board several years ago. So $7.1 million less this $300,000 is the $6.8 million that I just noted. So this is over and above the policy required reservations.
So you're saying that we have $6.8 million sitting with nothing to do?
At the third quarter, now the fourth quarter just ended, and we haven't finalized the books yet, but at the third quarter, we were estimating $7.1 million being available. And that was from a combination of the fully budgeted amount of expenditures not being spent or not estimated to be spent, and some additional revenue.
And is none of that built into next year's budget at all?
None of that is built into next year's budget.
Thank you. I make a motion to approve.
Yep, that's great news, Bonnie.
I should be clear that none of the $7.1 million in available fund balance is built into next year's budget. almost all of those revenues that attribute it to there being $7.1 million available, that was already known when we did the budget and factored into the fiscal year 18 budget. So I don't want to leave with you assuming that we're going to have that much more to add to the fiscal year 18 budget.
Right.
And we are still far from closeout.
Yes, we are.
And really quick, briefly, are you done? So that increased the general fund balance reserve. We went from 10% to 11%. So
Yes.
that's, doesn't count that. And we also contributed 0.25% to the Budget Stability Reserve Fund again.
Yes, we did. We
What-
did. So those, I'm sorry, go ahead.
About how much was that, those combined in addition
I'd
reserves?
have to get back to you.
Okay.
I don't have that information.
Is it just a rough figure, a couple million?
I don't have the rough.
Okay, never mind.
Too many
But
numbers
it's more.
going on.
Sure, got it. Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion to approve. All right, thank you, Bonnie. Call the
Thanks.
question.
6 yes.
Hey, and Mr. Chairman, board members, could I have the floor computer again, please? I had these slides loaded there. One of the items was to make the budget adjustments necessary and appropriations to activate the IDX incentives. And I was out today at the old GM plant, the IDX plant, and wanted to show the community what's going on out there, just because there is so much to be proud of. This space was actually a high-temperature treating room in which GM had left behind a pile of salt. The humidity had eaten the paint off the walls. When we saw this and toured it with the Racer Trust folks, the paint was literally falling off the walls. The conduiting was falling down. It was coming apart. And the IDX team has done, this is seen inside the space, that there was a cooling water channel that ran in the floor that you could drive a small car through. And that has been filled in. The floor is like new. The roof work is being done. There were voices in the community that wondered, there were some on the staff that wondered if there would be ever anyone who would reuse the old GM plant. But we're blessed to have folks with vision and energy and means that are putting that to good use and headed toward a bright future with IDX, and I'm just so proud of it. I wanted to share it, so thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. That's good.
And-
Good update.
We will move on then to public presentations. Amy, do we have anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anybody that didn't sign up that'd like to speak at this time? Okay, Mr. Plating.
Hello, my name is Larry Plating. I'm from the Cortland District. My presentation is entitled, What Would Thomas Jefferson Say? Dr. Noah Webster was an intellectual genius of our founding era. He saw the course our 13 colonies were taking and recognized that what was to become the United States was not just another extension of the greatest empire in the world. It was a group of self-governing communities that had integrated many of the ideas and principles flowing out of the Westminster Standards of the 1650s in England into the warp and woof of the American culture and government. All of these concepts required an American dictionary to precisely illuminate what the American colonies were becoming. Thus, Dr. Webster took up the task to create an educational philosophy for this nation along with a dictionary. He finished the first American dictionary in 1828. Its strength lies in the fact that all of its definitions are biblical definitions. You can even use it online today. Just dial up Webster's 1828. Let me read you Noah Webster's definition of education. Education, noun, Latin, educatio. The bringing up as of a child, instruction, formulation of manners. Education comprehends all that series of instruction and disciplines which is intended to enlighten the understanding, to correct the temper, and to form the manners and habits of youth and fit them for usefulness in their future stations. To give a child a good education in manners, arts, and science is important. To give them a Christian education is indispensable, and an immense responsibility rests on the parents and guardians who neglect these duties. By the way, you are one of those sets of guardians by virtue of your location here. Men like Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and James Madison, John Adams, George Washington, and many other leaders were influenced by Dr. Webster. We could name John Quincy Adams, John Adams' son, as a poster child of Noah Webster's philosophy of education. Would that our children were getting an education like his today. Dr. Webster's vision for the future of this country probably was most closely aligned with Samuel Adams, who had the foresight to create committees of correspondence with a clear purpose to unify the hearts of 13 self-governing colonies. The Fairfax Resolves of July 18, 1774, George Washington clearly expresses a position of bondage into which the king and empire had coerced the American peoples as it related to commerce and creativity, as well as the steps that they, as citizens, intended to take should the coercion continue. It is included as a footnote for your edification in the document I sent the boss. The resolves were part of that petitioning process to the king initiated through the colonies, which culminated in what we call the Declaration of National Independence of July 4, 1776.
Sir, if you could please sum up. I'm sorry, but your time has expired.
Okay, I can sum up. Just 2 questions. I know the statutes and Constitution of Virginia require a study of Virginia schools. I wonder how well that is carried out. The test would be, what would Thomas Jefferson say? Would he be happy to see the outcome of Spotsylvania education? Do our students understand the responsibility placed upon them as citizens and as new voters as they actually graduate from high school now? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Collier?
Mary Lou Collier, Mr. Skinner's district. The other day, as I was getting ready to leave, a lady was trying to find her wandering dog while her other Doberman was running loose beside her, which makes me wonder, and maybe the other citizens in the county wonder, what is the status of our animal shelter? If you can give us some kind of an update in the near future as to what's being done. Also, the combined efforts of the city and the Spotsylvania, how revenue sharing is doing on that joint venture. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time that didn't sign up to speak? No, we'll close the public presentation time. Mark?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to a presentation and report regarding special service districts. There have been a couple of board comments I'll mention as Wanda and the team are setting up that have related to this conversation. One starting simply with reflection on the commitment made by the developers of Alexander's Crossing and Jackson Gateway developments, of their willingness to contribute to a special service district for transportation improvements, and then other board comments concerning the need for revenues to be identified to fund transportation improvements in the Massaponax area, other comments about the need for improvements in other areas, and still other board comments about the need to perhaps consider special tax districts as a mechanism for financing of transportation improvements in multiple areas of the county, if not countywide. So it's really quite a range of possibilities. Wanda and team, thank you for being here, and can't wait to see what you have.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, board members. The topic this afternoon is special service districts, specifically for transportation improvements. I understand there is some interest in revisiting or talking about transportation impact fees and learning a little bit about Stafford's experience, so I have prepared a few extra slides that we can go over after the special service district discussion if that's the pleasure of the board. The county does have several special service districts in place at Cosner's Corner and then at Harrison Crossing, so I'm not going to go in detail into the ordinance requirements, but there are a couple of key concepts related to development of the ordinance, and those are that obviously you must first identify what is your project list and what are the costs associated with those projects. The ordinance needs to show that any area included within a district needs to benefit from those transportation improvements. Zones, zoning districts, or specific areas can be excluded from the district, but that district needs to be a contiguous area that includes that project area for any transportation improvements that are proposed to be covered through the district. The Board of Supervisors provided some direction to bring back a district that is as large as possible. We also heard, as was previously mentioned, a focus on perhaps the Massaponax area and on improvements along Route 1. So what we have brought to you is a concept district. It's not a staff recommendation. This is just a concept district to get the conversation started. The purpose is to generate funds to apply for transportation improvements in the Route 1 and Routes 2 and 17 corridors. And the idea is that any funds generated through a special service district tax would serve as a match to other funding rather than trying to raise the whole amount in order to fund the improvements themselves. And the reason for that is you can see here the project list. We've got a $600 million price tag, very round number, planning level estimates. But what we did was we looked at all the projects within our thoroughfare plan within that general area described. These include widenings or improvements to existing roads. They include new roads such as the road connecting between Germanna Community College and Spotsylvania Avenue. Include 126, the exit 126 interchange modification report, improvements, and also the corridor study along Route 1 and 208 and 2 and 17 that are currently underway, implementation of those items. So there is a project list that is included in the board packet that breaks it down by project as to what the cost is for each and also includes levels of service information for each. Some cost concepts to consider. The entire project list, as I mentioned, is $600 million, very round general number. We would need a referendum authority to issue general obligation bonds, and that is the lowest rate option. For every $1 million borrowed, the county can expect $71,000 in annual debt service for 25 years on transportation projects. And the maximum debt capacity beyond the existing capital improvements plan is an additional $50 million. So this is the map that encompasses that list of projects that I showed you. And what we did here was using the idea that we currently have in place with our other service districts, we limited the parcels to those that are industrial, commercial, office, and mixed-use zoned properties within the area. So that really, when you do that, that defines your district right there. Everything beyond what you see here is residential zoned or rural zoned. Certainly, a special service district could include residential, rural zoned properties. It could be much larger. There's certainly an argument could be made that the project list that was shown would benefit a much larger area if you were to include residential properties. But this concept before you limits it to non-residential properties, except for those that are within those mixed-use areas that have been recently zoned. And you'll also notice here, it almost becomes three different districts if you look at it. There could be one district that's focused on the Route 1 corridor. There could be one district that's focused on the 17, and then one here along Tidewater Trail. So really, you can look at this multiple different ways. It could be broken up. It could be one large district. I think if we were to proceed with this concept that's right before you, we would probably include all of these residential zoned properties. And if the board desired not to tax the residential properties, those would be excluded by zone from the ordinance. And that then would just create that contiguous district. There are approximately 1,870.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
If you go back to that slide, now you said that none of this plan included residential other than mixed use and things that were recently approved. But now you just said that you could pull the residential out of this plan. So
Yes.
I'm confused.
If you include the residential within the actual boundary of the district, but the desire was not to actually tax it, the residential zones could be excluded in the ordinance. And it's really just creating a solid district that, you know, once you start to have these open areas or donut hole areas, that doesn't make as strong a district. A strong district is one that is solid, has good outside boundaries, and not a lot of
What you put
voids.
before us right now does not include residential.
Yeah, this one does not include any residential. So that does include the 1,870 parcels. As I mentioned, they are all non-residential parcels currently assessed at $1.69 billion, and that's a current assessment. So all of these mixed-use properties that are included in here, most of them are just beginning to develop. And also we have all the commercial to build out as well, industrial property to build out as well. So in the future, that value would go up. At this point in time, on that current assessed value, every penny on a special tax rate for the area would bring in $169,000 annually. 50 million, which, as I mentioned on the prior slide, is the maximum debt capacity beyond the existing CIP, equals 3.55 million in annual debt service. And it would require a special tax rate of 21 cents on the mapped service area that we showed you right now. And just for comparison purposes, we provided some additional statistics related to the county. Every penny on the base real estate tax rate across the entire county would bring in 1.3 million annually at current assessed values. And it would require a 3-cent increase on the base real estate rate for the whole county to apply that same amount. So the range of approaches that the county could take, very specific special service district, one project, two projects, a smaller area. For example, this conversation began with the Jackson Village and Alexander's Crossing projects. The item that's not funded currently between those two projects is the bridge crossing I-95. A special service district could be established around those two mixed-use projects that would fund that bridge. So that would be an example of a very specific, focused special service district. General funding, for example, Fairfax County takes a much more broad approach. The proposal that, or not the proposal, the concept that we showed you this evening is somewhere in the middle. We have a specific list of projects within that list, not just a general concept that we'll be doing transportation improvements in a general area. So with that, we've got a host of staff members here to answer your questions, and we're seeking feedback from the Board of Supervisors, questions, and ideas on how to move forward.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted a couple questions. At the end there, you were talking about the Alexandria crossing and the bridge. That was the bridge you were referring to from Jackson Village to Alexandria. Now, that is a proffer. They proffered that bridge at a certain trigger as far as the development within both projects. Question for council here, if we could. If we ended up using a special service or the concept that you were talking about, and we put that bridge up, could, as the triggers hit on both these developments, could we reimburse ourselves through that proffer? Because when we approve these, the approval was at a certain amount of development in their commercial and residential, that they would provide a bridge over 95 to connect both these, okay? And the thing is, obviously Alexandria Crossing is probably a little bigger than Jackson Village, and therefore Alexandria Crossing is going to come at a later date. So my point is, once Alexandria Crossing does establish, starts putting roads to Hospital Boulevard, can we, if we decide to use something like this, can we reimburse ourselves from the proffers as they meet those triggers that force them to start building that?
As I recall, there was funding that was proffered with those two projects that can be used for transportation projects. And my understanding at the time was, while it certainly was a good amount of money, it may not be enough to actually build a bridge. So we could certainly, in so much as we have that money, we can put that towards constructing that bridge. In addition, if we form special service districts in the area, we can use that funding as well to contribute toward the bridge. Now, whether or not we could outlay that and then pay ourselves back, from proffered monies, that's something I'd have to check on and see if that's something we could do. But certainly, at the outset, to the extent that we have the money, paid on the proffers, we can use that towards building the bridge, and to the extent that we create a special service district in the area, we can also use those funds to also contribute to constructing the bridge. But as far as that accounting transaction, that's something we had to check on.
Well, I guess my point was what you just said, that when we approved these, we approved the project to be, the bridge to be put up. Here's what, the developments would provide the funding for the bridge. We were going to do it because we could then revenue share. If we, as a county, do it, we can revenue share with VDOT on this thing. And so it actually could cover it, but they were responsible for the cost of that bridge, especially at the time that they met those residential, commercial size units that were on there in their development. So I'm saying if we did do that and we used it in this to start it, we should be able to reimburse the entire cost of the bridge through the two developments. If you would check on the proffers on that, I'm pretty sure we were pretty adamant about that.
And I believe that the proffer is worded in such a way that it's not exclusively for use for the bridge, so that those funds, we could fund the bridge through a special service district and then use those funds elsewhere on Route 1 would be another approach. So
I believe that's correct, yeah.
It was the intent, myself, and I think Mr. Sabula over there, is that this is a whole project for everybody wants to know what we're doing infrastructure-wise. And with that bridge, we now open up the possibility, as Mr. Yakubowski and we're looking at it someday, to connect Germanna Community College down to Spotsylvania Avenue.
Mr. Skinner?
Yeah.
So I just throw out there that you just heard, I mean, we definitely have projects that need funded in that area. You're going to have to wait a long time for that bridge funding to come in, and maybe that's what we want to do. But in this case, adding the SSD to those two areas, I think you're going to have places that you need to add to the infrastructure for that. So I think really we're probably not going to have enough, as a matter of fact,
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to know the public
sure.
realizes that when we approved Alexandria Crossing and Jackson Gateway, I believe is what it was, is that we specifically, and they always now are putting in there that we can use this transportation funding for other purposes and everything of that nature. But what you're saying is, and I think this was just an example. I wasn't really looking at this is going to move to the top of the thing. I understand that. But the people need to know that this is the type of infrastructure that we are using, and it's not like we're trying to say, I'm going to put more houses in there and we didn't think about the infrastructure. Absolutely not. The infrastructure will go along with this housing and both these developments as they progress through the development to where we have formulated a plan to get people off of Route 1, which is very, very important to us. Okay, and there is bypasses there. Now, I understand what you're saying. We can do this to help with all these other roads. My goodness, there's a lot of roads, not only in our district, but throughout the county that could use something like this too. We could find it, but no. I just I think I understand it, but just, I wanted to make it clear too out there.
Mr. Sabula?
Mr. Skinner covered some of this, but I want something to be clarified in my mind because it was very, very clear in my mind when we approved both of these projects that there was $4 million set aside from each project in proffers to build that bridge. And if that's not the case, I need to know that now because the road that we're talking about from Spotsylvania Avenue on down to where we anticipate that bridge crossing will never happen if this isn't going to happen. And it's been in forefront in my mind and in my planning that this $4 million each was to pay for the bridge and that money would be available at a certain time during the development. If that's not the case, I want to know it. I want to know it now. Thank you.
Mr. Spila, no, I don't believe that is the case. The money is proffered for transportation projects, and that can certainly include a bridge to be built by the county through revenue sharing or through VDOT on its own, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, that money is available, and it's required, in the proffers. There are triggers where it will come to the county, and if the county wants to use that in order to fund that bridge, it can certainly do so. That's my understanding of it. I worked on those proffers, so that money is available and can be used for the bridge when it's available.
Mr. Benton?
I guess maybe we need some conversation from the board about, I'm thinking we should include the residential. They're the users of it. They're the ones that are going to benefit from it immediately. We're talking about a 21 cents tax increase for the businesses, where they're the ones employing our residents. They're the ones hiring plumbing, electrical, heating and air conditioning, cleaning. They're buying their supplies and hopefully locally, but at least bringing in materials to the county to do their business. I don't know why they should bear the entire burden of this themselves. I would like to get some information on how much additional it would bring in if we put a little something on the residents living in these areas. That's
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
So I'd just like to follow up with that. So I think one thing, and I asked this come before the board for the SSD only because it was agreed upon on the developers on undeveloped residential for Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing. Two, I think when they came before us, they set up to a quarter. Does staff have that number available? I remember 25 cents. I could be wrong.
I don't recall that. I'll have to
Okay.
look into that.
So my issue here is more so that I think a 21-cent increase on somebody that's already living, especially someone on fixed income, you're going to get some calls. So that's the bad part of including residential. They are including residential on the new developments and mixed use that are new, correct?
Correct.
So those would be included already. I just want to make that clear. And the developer, who I don't know, have they started developing homes in either place yet?
The apartments are going up in several of the projects, and we do have plats that are approved, and I believe building permits are beginning to be pulled for some of the single-family and attached residential.
So my issue is the developer, when they came before the board for both of those projects, said, we will support an SSD on our property. And that seems to be the no-brainer that as a group, we should collectively move forward to, because they said that was part of the deal, and it's a year later and we haven't done anything, probably more than a year. And now we've expanded that too. So just for the board's situational awareness.
Now, make sure I understand what you said. That was for non-residential though? Or was it?
The expansion looks to be non-residential. I think that's what Wanda said, correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
So the question is, we have mixed use and recently reapproved Jackson Village, and then there's other areas that are already existing that you've expanded. If you pull up the map
Correct.
on the floor computer. And so the other areas that we expanded off of, so could you circle where Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing are on here? So that's the specific area, which is fairly large. There's how many units between that? Is that 5,000? Is it further down?
Approximately, yes.
I thought there were about
the apartments.
2,500 units in each place, of which apartments are starting to go up. So every month that we don't have an SSD that the developer, I don't want to say they asked for, but they certainly agreed to, is a month of those revenues that we could be using for infrastructure for those apartments that are going up and other things right now that we're losing.
So they would be the apartments and residential planned in that area
In
would be
that-
part of the SSD, right?
Correct.
But existing would not be. So when you, because you've just circled a small area, right? And that's specifically what the two developers that came agreed to having an SSD. Now, there's other areas you've expanded to, and that, you're saying, does not include residential.
Correct, except for the areas that are also mixed use, for example, New Post, Crossroads, South Point. So there are some mixed-use zones within those that do include residential uses.
And those are all new,
And-
though, correct?
And those are all
Relatively
new. And when I spoke of the single-family and attached that are being platted, that's occurring out at New Post. It's not occurring yet at the Alexander's Crossing and Jackson Village area. But yeah, those are the only areas that would include homes or apartments. It's mixed-use zoned.
And you can't, inside an SSD, so we could have, like you were saying, you could have 3 here, you could have 5 here, you could have 10 here, but you can only have one rate inside each SSD. So you couldn't, so what scared me, like if we had a 21-cent SSD on Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing, you couldn't then say, oh, it's only 5 cents over here. It'd have to be a separate one just for those two places, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. Was that in the proffers that they would put an SSD on their property?
No.
Okay,
It was
so
not.
I think it's very out of bounds to say that they agreed to do an SSD. They might have agreed to look at it. They might have agreed that if it fit their plan, they would do it. But the time to get an SSD put on there was doing the rezoning. And since that wasn't done, putting an SSD on top of it would need their agreement after the fact. And it wouldn't?
No, the county doesn't need their agreement to put an SSD on there. There's authority in the Virginia Code that where the board can do that without their agreement. That's correct.
Right, well, I'm saying that, for me at least, let me put it that way. If you want to have an extra tax, Cosner's Corner, for example, Harrison Crossing was another one that I supported both of those. And those SSDs were in the rezoning at the time, asked for specifically by the developer to do specific projects. For example, Route 1 was widened, 17 was realigned, those types of things were done, but it was done at the time of rezoning. So yes, we can come back and put an we can put an SSD over the entire county if we want to. We can put an SSD over Route 3 if we want to. But then we are taxing folks who have not asked to be taxed. And that is where my difficulty with this whole thing is. Plus, my other difficulty with this whole thing is that this is my district. And I know it was said that somebody would be getting phone calls if this tax went into place. Yeah, I'd be getting them. So I would ask that any movement forward, those considerations be taken into account, because if not, then what we should do is every transportation project that the county does should have a special service district set up in those areas to pay for those. Residents in my district are paying for paved roads in Livingston and Berkeley, and vice versa. They're paying for other improvements in other parts of the county. So before we go placing a taxing district, we need to be very clear about what exactly we're going to be getting out of it. Number one, we can't do the projects. We have $50 million of space in our available bonds. $50 million does not get much, even if we were to revenue share that, which we all know that revenue sharing every year is talked about as maybe not even being there next year. So that's can be changed, that can be taken away from us on a whim. It's the state government, and they don't necessarily tell us ahead of time what is going to happen. When I look at this map, what I see is a tax on our existing businesses that will drive them out. We already have Cosner's Corner that has a lot of empty storefronts. You're talking about going down Route 1 where we've talked about revitalization. You know, those places there can't sustain a 21-cent tax increase. It's just, it can't happen. You know, a lot of them are barely getting by as is. And yet there is resistance, consistent resistance that I hear from my fellow board members of a 1, 2, or 3 penny tax rate adjustment to do exactly what they're asking for these folks over here to bear the burden of. And in my mind, that is unfair. It's not right. It's not the way that you do policy. If there's a specific district, like I gave the example of Cosner's Corner, they asked for it. Harrison Crossing asked for it. And if anybody else comes forward and says, please put a taxing district on our property so that we can pay for this improvement, I would be happy to. But I'm not going to put anybody in a taxing district that is not asking for it to do improvements that they are not the sole beneficiaries of. Everybody in this county benefits from Massaponics working well, and they come and they shop because we all live in the same county, and we want them to shop in the same county for tax revenue to support our businesses, et cetera. So putting a taxing district on our commercial corridors, I just don't support, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakubowski, and I'll agree with you completely, 100%, except on one thing, and I don't think we should do this either. Staff expanded this. I'm not sure why they expanded it beyond Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing. I think another board member asked for that. But my recollection, we can pull the tapes, is that during the time, and that's why I've been asking staff to bring this back, for Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing, that they agreed to an SSD at that time. And my beef with staff is, why haven't we put that SSD that they agreed to at that time on? You're not going to get calls from people there because the homes aren't built yet. The apartments, I think, are just getting built right now, so nobody's having that tax. And again, I might be wrong. Let's go ahead and go back. We can talk to the 2 developers. I am 90% sure that during those meetings, they agreed to a SSD during that time that those things were proffered. Sure. Mr. Yakubowski.
If I might, and they might have, but the problem is this board then approved it without getting that in writing. So,
but I don't think SSDs are not part of a proffer or getting things in writing. As Carl already explained, we can do that without writing, but they verbally during those meetings agreed to it. So it's not like you make an agreement to rezone. We don't need that. That's not legally something we need. They made that agreement during that time to have the SSD put on their property. We just never did it, and I'm not sure why. And like I said, that's been a frustration of mine, is like, why haven't we done that yet? Every month that we go without doing that, the county's losing revenue that the developers, the 2 developers independently agreed to provide.
well then, my question for staff then is Jackson Village and Alexander's Crossing, SSDs just on there would provide what kind of revenue?
We don't have that
I
information.
know
We'd
you
have to
don't,
go
yeah.
back and
Well,
redo this.
So I think this whole meeting was to see where the board wanted to go and for us to have this discussion that we are, whether we wanted to expand it, whether we just want to do Jackson Village, Alexander Crossing, whether we don't want to do, we'd have to advertise a public hearing. At that public hearing, there'd be more information presented on those projects, and I would hope that you, as a representative of the area, would weigh in on those projects that you'd want funded with an SSD in that area.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, Mr. Skinner.
You know, one of the things we're talking, even though, and they may have said, yeah, we'll agree to at least look at it, but the problem is we haven't set what tax rate we would put in that SSD, and as every SSD you see, you know, we've taken the Cosner Corner, is it east, I believe it is, and we've reduced that over the time period as we've done it from 35 down to 25 or whatever we set it at. So I think the thing is, the only objection I have is when we start doing any type of residential taxing, okay, other than what we use as personal property and what everything else we do, and not personal, but real estate tax, I do understand why we do it on the commercial wise, and that's appropriate. But I think we set a precedence from here on out, and we have never done that before. And as Greg, as you said, you thought that the people, yeah, they use it, but remember, they pay taxes for what they're using and stuff of that nature. And that money comes from the state, too. It should come from the state for transportation and stuff of that nature. So, you know, as far as a commercial SSD, and that's really what it was used, in Cosner East was really to pay for the bridge that went over there to help HCA open the hospital. They could not open that hospital without a bridge being over that. So that's why we worked hard with VDOT and with Silver to pay for the bridge, get it done. And then for every acre they sold to other people, they were giving us pretty close to $50,000 an acre. I'm not sure, but it's pretty close to that. Is that not right? Yes.
That's correct. I think it was 60,000.
Okay, it's close to
50 or 60, yes.
And we're paying for that bridge back. I mean, we could get an update as far as how much more we have, but I know with the development there that Silver just put up, they paid for it there. There's quite a little bit of development going up there too. So it was set up so that at the end of the time, when all that land is taken, then the bridge is going to be paid for, if not sooner. So, you know, like I said, this is a great discussion, and there is a way we should put SSDs out there to help us. But as you say, this really, as you said, Mr. Chairman, that is Greg's area, my area, and also Chris's, and we would like to have an input on where we do it and what we do it and how we do it. And I think it's a good idea to do it in some way, but commercial-wise rather than just residential sort of, I don't know. We open Pandora's box or set a precedence that we may not want to set.
Sure. I just remind you that this would be residential that's not yet built and was agreed upon. And maybe it wasn't, but my recollection it was. Mr. Benton?
Well, that's what I was going to get at. Maybe we should go back and verify exactly what was said and what was agreed to, and move forward from there. I am for the residential being taxed also, especially the unbuilt right now. You know, you want to compare Livingston and all to down here. I'll tell you what, come take a look at the roads that are being built up in Livingston compared to what's down here with the nice asphalt. You know, it's a big difference for any of the board members that say that your members pay for our roads. We certainly aren't getting the quality that is down here, nor does the Livingston folks, in my opinion, at least the ones out by Lake Anna, are running all over the place on Route 3 and 4 Mile Fork and all these businesses that we have down here as much as the ones that are actually living in the areas. Just my opinion. I have no data or statistical information to support any of that, so take it for what it is. But you know, we definitely got to go back and look and see what was said and agreed to, and then go from there. But in my opinion, definitely the residential would need to be included if that in fact was said by the developers or agreed to by the developers. So, Mr. Yakubowski, you're always wanting to know where we're going to get this money to fix all these roads and do all this expansion for all this area. Well, this may be one way. So at least put a couple nickels in the stack. So that's it.
Mr. Skinner?
Last question, last point of thing here. First of all, it's the state's responsibility to do transportation. It's not our people. It's not our residents. Okay, so maybe the state could get their act together and start adopting, and that's tough. Let's put the issue on the state to be the guy that wears the bad hat and maybe raise a gas tax or something that will help us with that. And the other thing, Mr. Bennett, I'd like to remind you of, if you take a look, and I gave you that list, you have 48% of what's on our budget right now for future plans that are either budgeted for or going to be budgeted for. 48% of that money that we have out there is going to go to your district, sir. And so I don't want people to think you're being starved. Absolutely not. But you have received and will receive the majority, almost the majority of the funds we have out there, sir. And I know you have that list because I presented it to you and stuff of that nature. So, like I said, I'd really, you know, it's not up to the people. They pay a tax. They pay state tax and everything else. Let's get the people in the state and also the federal government to wherever they help us with it and get the roads together that way. If we can assist in some way, that's fine. But I don't think it's the responsibility of residents to pay for our roads.
I agree with that, but I do think we need to make sure we're talking about unbuilt houses and already existing houses, so. Yeah, Mr. Benton.
Well, sorry for the back and forth debate. I question the 48% going to Livingston District, but, and our roads. But you say it's the state's responsibility, but they haven't been doing anything, and they haven't been doing anything for years. And then you talk about taxing. Well, all they're going to do is put it back on us. I mean, regardless of how you look at it, for the money, it's put back on the citizens. So we can either try to do things for our jurisdiction, our county, or we can let all our residents put all this money into a state fund where I'd go as far as 95% of what was going to be built is not in Spotsylvania County. So.
Right. Any other discussion? Mr. Yakubowski.
Yeah, one point, if I could. So we're going to put an SSD on housing that has yet to be there, so that's an additional tax that they will pay, and yet we're against proffers. What is a proffer except an additional tax on the residents that are going to be moving in there? So we can play a shell game and call it this name or call it that name if we like. The fact is that we need the infrastructure and we need to find a way to pay for it. The fact that the developers were in front of us, and I'm almost positive the thing that I recall them saying, and we need to look at the tape, is they would be willing to look at it. I do not remember them agreeing to a rate, to them agreeing to a district, to them agreeing to commercial and residential, to them agreeing to all of their property, a portion of the property, what date it starts, any of those things. So I am very uncomfortable sitting here and basically saying that those developers, and I voted against both of those developments for other reasons, stated that they would be in an SSD for a fact. I think that that's very, it's a stretch, in my opinion, and I don't like to put words in their mouth. I don't believe that they had said that, and if they had said that, then again, why are we taking nearly 2 years to even bring this back up? And I don't put that on staff. I don't think that it is staff's responsibility to follow up what a developer has promised in public session or private session or in a phone call. It's on board members to do that. I did not hear it. They did not say it to me. It's not my district, but it's across the street. I'm not sure any discussions Mr. Skinner had with them or anybody else. I have not asked. But publicly I did not hear them say that, and I do not think that it is fair to them to put them on the hook by saying that they agreed to something when I'm not sure that they did agree to it. As far as where there's no money coming for the infrastructure, I think that there are, first things first, what we need to do, and as we saw with this list, we have $600 million worth of projects in this area that we need to fund. And even if the county took on all of them, we could barely do 50 million. Maybe 100 million if we were to get matching funds. So how do we prioritize that? How do we come up with the list? How do we figure out what are the projects that need to be done? And at the core of all this, though, and I really would love to know what's happening on FAMPO, because the last thing I read on FAMPO was that we were going to spend, or there was a potential $8 million to turn a third lane of, or a fourth lane of Route 3 into a through lane. Where's the money for everybody else? I mean, I just sit here and wonder why, again, in this budget that we just passed, that was passed, I should say, we're only spending, or we're not spending any new transportation dollars. We actually, and it was sent around to everybody via email, that Ms. Jewell had sent out, was out of the bond referendum of 2014 that we asked the voters to go out there and approve, we've only spent $900,000, I think is the number. So we have millions upon millions upon millions of borrowing capability out there for us to do. The voters said, yes, go do it. And we sit here and now we want to tax either developers or businesses in those corridors. And I'm stunned at us sitting here and doing this in public. And this is, I appreciate everything staff does because they do it very, very well, but I don't support it. And I've brought this up at previous meetings, and I think it's something we need to bring up again. Before we have staff go and spend their valuable time doing issues, we need to have an agreement of the board, a vote of the board, to ask them to do things. And if there was a vote taken on this, my apologies for not remembering that it happened. I don't remember it happening, but this right here, I don't support anything that they brought forward. And I'm not sure if there's a majority on the board to go forward with everything that they have done. So I really am also kind of annoyed that they've had to waste all their time on issues that I don't know who brought this up. I didn't bring it up. I'm not sure if Mr. Skinner brought this up.
I did for Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing. And any board member, just like Mr. Skinner, has the ability to bring up airport issues and definitely task staff with doing that. We don't need a majority vote to bring up an issue or ask staff to do things.
But Mr. Ross, maybe we should. This is my
That's
point.
fine. You want to vote on it right now? I mean, we can.
Mr. Skinner can bring up airport issues for the sole reason that the airport's in his district, okay? If you want to do something in your district, go for it. I don't really care. But when this has an impact on my district, and I don't even know it's happening, I do find that very annoying. And I do think that we should have a vote when it comes to these type of issues, because what we're doing right now is we have now wasted staff's time, and we have wasted our time at a board meeting going over an issue that I'm not even sure there is the majority of this board that would vote for it.
You're welcome to your opinion of wasting time. In my opinion, this is something that came up 2 years ago, and it's something I've asked staff to do because the developer agreed to it 2 years ago. We'll go back, we can do the tapes. I think we should reach out to the developers and ask them face-to-face right now. And just ask them, would you guys agree with that? Because in my recollection is they did. And you know what? We don't have to argue about it. We've got tapes. It's the greatest thing about technology. In our modern day, we can go back and actually look and see what happened. And if you don't think it's worth the staff's time, I'll do it with my own time.
Well, Mr. Ross, excuse me, Mr. Ross has been interrupting me. I would say that wasting staff's time is not looking at just Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing, because that's not what we just looked at. If you saw the map, it is much larger than that, and that is what is the waste of the time.
And I would agree with you.
And if you want to go ahead and ask them to do that, that's fine, go right ahead. But for them to expand it into that, that's where I'm wondering, where did that come from?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Mark?
Mr. Chair.
Want to answer why it got expanded, Mr. Sabula?
Thank you. Alexander Crossing's in my district. I was not consulted on this. I was not asked if I wanted this information. I think it would have just been common courtesy had that at least taken place. As for the discussion of the SSD during the rezoning process, I do recall that there was some discussion, but I do not recall any approval by the developers to agree to do an SSD. So I don't know where this, I know where the request comes from, but I don't know why it's coming through without consulting with the supervisor whose district one of these things is entirely in. And I made the motion to approve both of those developments, one for Mr. Skinner's district and Alexander Crossing in my district. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how a board member can just jump up and do something for another board member's district without at least pre-coordinating, and I think that's an insult, and I think it should cease. Thank you.
No insult intended. Any other discussion? Mr.
Chairman, if I could, I would like to answer the question because as noted at the beginning of the presentation, there were in fact several comments from board members that led to both this presentation coming forward contributed to the timing of it, and certainly contributed to the variety and the range of focus involved. I personally, at the moment, most deeply regret the absence of Mr. McLaughlin, who, to my recollection, and recollection is a faulty thing, I concur with the thanks for having the digital record, but I do believe that he was a supervisor who made the comment toward the notion of expanding the potential district and expanding appreciation, or at least focus on the variety of improvements to consider these multiple corridors and to consider even, or at least look at, what the tax implications would be for the county as a whole in terms of affording these improvements. There were, I believe, to my recollection, multiple occasions. Mr. Chairman, you did not bring this up once. I wish I could say we had been so responsive as to bring it back after the first urging, but in fact there have been 3 or 4 occasions that I can recall offhand where you raised the issue that there was agreement expressed by the developer, or openness expressed by the developer, or concurrence expressed by or willingness expressed. There are different tellings of it, and we will certainly, and it's really for the purpose of the need of this feedback that the matter was brought forward when it has been brought forward, and with the whole range, and there was certainly no disrespect or slight intended to any member of the board at all. The puzzle for us is that, Wanda, can you go back to slide 8? Is that in the range of possibilities based on the board comments was all the way from the very narrow. There were these 2 developers, 2 developments that appeared willing to this outcome, and we will certainly, to whatever extent the record may be material, we can check the record. We can certainly refreshen that inquiry with them as well. My own recollection of the process was that they were as interested in the bridge improvement as anyone else was. That said, that would be an example of the micro version on the top. The specific, here's the district, these people want this improvement, they are agreeable to paying for it. Why don't we use this authority that the code gives us and that our council agrees we can use to develop that district, go forward, get that in place, and be collecting that revenue? That's one range of this. The other end of the discussion is the macro end, and we never need to bring that back again, or we can bring it back again somewhere in the context of the either the strategic plan discussion, in which it may be relevant, or we may take this or encourage board members that we would make it available to take slide 6, if you would, Wanda, back over to FAMPO and to others to concern themselves in the transportation realm with, these are our major corridors, these are areas of significant impact with those corridors, and as the community evolves, these will be areas of apparent need. So that's the full range, but I'm very happy to bring back, and we have made notes on checking the record if the board should see fit. And this is just what I have noted along the way and would covet the board's direction on, but I think there have been several comments toward checking the record from the Jackson Village and Alexander Crossing land use cases. Whatever that record shows, perhaps also if the board would direct checking with or inquiring with the developers of those properties with regard to their willingness to participate in a conversation at this point about a special district, and to bring back from the staff the information on what per penny would be generated in those 2 developments were the conversation to continue.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please. Thank you. Just one quick thing, and this is for Wanda. Wanda, can you go back? And I want to make sure I say this right. When you defined what an SSD, the purpose of the SSD is to, generate funds to apply toward transport improvements in that particular area. So the one thing we can't forget is we're not going to put an SSD over there to go over to Route 2 and then find that. So that's one of the things we do. And I think if you when you're going to look through all this, you'll probably find the developer in principle probably agreed and said, yeah, we can talk about an SSD. But, and I think that's what you see, because I can tell you there was no penny put on what particular, it wasn't 21 cents, it wasn't 35 cents. And in their negotiations, they probably in principle agreed to an SSD, okay, but they never stipulated whether it was going to go on residential or whether it was going to go on commercial, which most of the SSDs up to this point, I don't think we have an SSD that includes residential, do we, in this county? So I'm not saying that they're the ones that are going to set the thing, because, you know, it wouldn't be in their favor to change what we've done in the past for residential. So in general, they probably agreed to looking into an SSD. In their minds, it may have been for commercial only, not residential. And I think this is what you're going to find when you go back and look at all these things. Because I know there was never any cent, whether it be 25, 35, or 1 cent, that was put as far as what issues, whether it be on the commercial buildings, there would be a certain penny, or residential and stuff of that nature. So again, but the most important thing is if we put an SSD on these, what in the local area other than that bridge, which will really help us, because they obligated to put in a 4-lane, and I know that in the, not Alexandria, but the other Jackson Gateway was supposed to be a 4-lane highway from Route 1 all the way to the bridge. The bridge was going to be agreed to upon to both of them build it. I believe $4 million was each. Okay, whether it was set aside, because nowadays most of the things we accept can be used for any, but this was important, and that's going to be up for this board to decide to get the report for. It doesn't matter, because if I've got 4 members, yes. If I don't, then it may not happen. So all I'm saying is that we want to make sure that when we put the SSD, we put it for a project within that SSD area that it's going to be, and I think we're required to do that. So.
That's correct. So it would be the bridge in that case. If the SSD just encompassed those 2 projects, the only available transportation project would be the bridge.
And we required Alexandria Crossing to join a 4-lane highway to Hospital Boulevard, okay? And that's why we then could continue across the street from Germanna down to Spotsylvania Avenue, which would keep everybody out for Route 1 south of Cosner Park. So, yes. Just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Okay, well, clearly, yep, Dr. Trampy, sorry.
When we approved Jackson Village, the assessment from staff was that it would pay for itself over 20 years. That was without a special tax district. In those proffers, the commercial side, and as with mixed use, the commercial side was intended to pay for the needs of the residential side. In Jackson Village, the proffers mandated that the commercial side be phased in alongside the residential side. In Alexander's Crossing, I think it was a mistake, that wasn't done. Theoretically, Alexander's Crossing, they could build every single housing unit and never build any of the commercial. And if that happens, it's not going to pay for itself. So in the case of Alexander's Crossing, I think we should consider a special service district, particularly if the commercial side of that development never materializes. Another point, I have to say, I resent being chastised for being, quote, against proffers. That is an accusation that has been thrown at us. That is not something I have certainly ever said. I believe development should pay for itself, and proffers are one way to do that. I do believe there are other ways for development to pay for itself. But I have never said I'm against proffers. Basically, I'm being chastised for contradicting a caricature of me, which makes absolutely no sense, is completely illogical, and I resent it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Okay, and I would just like to say my intent of bringing this forward was a discussion, not to hurt anybody's feelings or disrespect anybody. And with that, I think we're ready to move forward to, unless you need further direction, I think you've got it, the opioid discussion.
Actually, if I
Very
may,
fitting.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to suggest that we should proceed to closed session. We have a number of items to be briefed on there. If we could, I don't know if the opioids can be
Well,
a
how long is the
5-minute item.
opioid
If there
discussion?
are questions, those were informational reports that were provided to the board in your agenda packet. I see the fire chief here.
'Cause we're 45 minutes ahead of, well,
We're
not
45
really.
minutes ahead of public hearings, but if there are questions about the opioid reports, there are staff
So you weren't
here.
planning to present anything on opioid?
We're not planning
Okay.
to present.
Well, in that case, we could do board reports really quick. How about that?
Okay.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. Just one point, the Stars and Stripes celebration. Thank you to staff and everybody who puts in so much time and effort to make that such a big success. That was year 12, I do believe, and it keeps getting better year after year. Thank you to the Vacos companies for their support. And if anybody has not actually made it to the Stars and Stripes, I would suggest that you put it on your calendar for next year because it really is a great event. So thank you to everybody.
Mr. Sibulo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend everybody for the support that given to the public soccer tournament the last weekend. It was a great success, I know. I wasn't there for the final presentations. I believe Mr. Skinner may have been. But we've garnered about $15 million in increased revenue into the county as a result of that. And the people were expressed to me, they were extremely happy for the condition of the facility and just everything about Spotsylvania County, and that they wanted to come back again next year. And I certainly, for one, would welcome them to do that. Secondly, got two roads closed in my district. One is Blades Corner for bridge repair, and the other one is for the road repair in Massaponax Church Road. So be cautious for the detours around in those sections. Thank you.
Mr. Benton.
Yes, just as far as road closures, Jones Powell Road and right off of Lawyers and connects to Belmont is closed as of yesterday, and it will be closed through, I think, the 21st or 22nd of this month. They're taking down a hill that was basically no visibility over top of. And since we're saying we have some possible money in the future, and this is for future consideration, hopefully from this board, that maybe $500,000 can be put towards Livingston District and or Berkeley for some improvements to some dirt roads. That's it.
Dr. Trampy.
No report.
Mr. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple of things. First of all, Ed, if you would, real quick, correct me if I'm not wrong, but this board has already approved the we added the extra 3,000 square feet to the animal shelter, so now we're going to be up to about 19,000 square foot, and we approved that project at an earlier board. Is that correct? Because I know that Ms. Collier was asking for an update. So I think, if I can say properly, we went from 8,000 new square footage to 11,000 square footage, which brings us right to 19,000, or pretty close to it. And that has been approved to us, board, so we're working on getting that started. Just want that was a good question for the entire county. The other thing is, I would like to congratulate Mr. Vacos. Not only does he provide those fireworks for us, but he did win the Spotswood Award this year for all that he's done for this county throughout his life here, so congratulations on him. The other thing is, just to clarify, the VYSA, 2 years ago, we put in for the bid, and we've won that for 2 years. It's a 2-year project, so we automatically have them back. But all the coaches came up to the Dallas officials where the headquarters is, and they wanted to know if they could do this, make it a permanent, because the fields were in such good condition, and it's a learning progress. Next year, cars were in and out the entire time. But roughly, we had 15,000 people visit. We had 263 teams with 18 players on each team, which did not include the parents, the grandparents, and everything. And the $15 million revenue is shared between Stafford, ourselves, and City of Fredericksburg. But again, I understood that the Outback was sold out of food one night, and so on Route 3, and I had calls from local in the Massaponax area, give them heads up that we would need extra food. So Sonic and also Arby's were there to ask and know about. So I think it was a great success, and maybe someday we will have it permanently here, and we learned by everything we did that. And the last thing that for the county administrator, please, this is the final budget book, I think. You said a summary of it. This one that you've in our dad's fiscal year 2018 adopted budget. The only thing I would like to see in this is us, the supervisors. Although I will tell you that his staff and him, everybody did a wonderful job and put a lot of work on it, including the board members here. But the majority of it was done by his staff. But I think the citizens need to know that we are the ones that approved it. This is what we think we can do for the county, and in no place here do they actually have anybody's name in it. And I would like to be responsible for it as well, if there's any credit out there, to get a little credit. But if not, we take, we'll take both sides, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if you would like to have who they could call, especially in their district, if they're not satisfied with it, or if they are satisfied with it. But thank you very much for everything that this staff has done for us. That's all I have, sir.
And for myself, Mark, do you have numbers on the Stars and Stripes? Rough numbers or estimates of what we had out here?
I don't. I don't know if anyone present does yet.
I'm just guessing at least 20,000 people out here, but that was me. And I don't know whether that's accurate or not. I just want to thank staff from parking to manning the exhibits, the sheriff's office, for getting all the cars out of here. That I know that some were backlogged in the parking lot, but the sheriff's office seemed to do a great job getting the traffic out. And the fireworks were spectacular. It was just, it's an all-American event. I even got to dunk a couple school board members. Relatively cheap price for $1 for 6 balls. I think I dunked Baron Braswell 4 times. So Baron, here's to you. So, yeah, well, I don't know about that. But.
And that was $1 for the dunking stool. I do, Mr. Chairman, if I may, that one of the great blessings and is that the event is free.
Right.
For the community. And so folks can come out, and there are a lot of the kids' games, the bouncy houses and slides and things, the concerts, other music that can be enjoyed at no cost, and the fireworks are great.
It's truly an all-American experience. So if you haven't been out, as other board members have said, come on out next year, because it's outstanding. And with that, I think we need to go to closed session.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is your resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, specifically Department of Fire, Rescue, and Emergency Management personnel. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn in closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, specifically regarding the matter of Zoan Baptist Church versus Spotsylvania County, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, case number 3:17-CV-00457. in consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters, specifically matters of code enforcement. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3711A1 and 7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
Six yes.
Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2, 3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene a closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Jakubowski?
Aye.
Mr. Sabula?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Dr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
The chair's aye.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Next item is public presentations. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Is there anyone that didn't sign up to speak that would like to speak at this time? We'll close public presentations.
That brings us to a scheduled public hearing, which is R16-0008, Par 5 Development LLC, Dollar General. This is Charles Lee Merriman, RO 16-0008, which is in the Livingston District.
Have the floor computer, please. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As stated, this is a request by Par 5 Development to rezone approximately 3.5 acres from Agricultural 3 to Commercial 1 with proffers to allow for the construction of a Dollar General store on a portion of the property. The Planning Commission voted 5-2 to recommend approval. During the Planning Commission hearing, there were concerns about traffic making safer movements off of Route 208 onto the site. The commission asked staff if we would reconvene with VDOT to relook at the warrants for a right turn lane. We did indeed meet with the VDOT and consult with our traffic engineer, and they both confirmed that this site didn't warrant full turn lane improvements at this time. The applicant has amended the GDP to address those concerns by adding a 200-foot taper, which would allow safe movements of traffic off of 208 onto the site. Staff does recommend approval of R16-008 with the proffers and the revised GDP that shows the 200-foot taper. This is an aerial view of the site. In red, there is an existing historic house on the property, which is documented with the Department of Historic Resources as a unique example of Italianate style dating back to 1875. The property is surrounded by other agriculturally zoned properties, in addition to a number of Commercial 1 and Commercial 2 zone properties, which make up the existing commercial cluster in this area, and that's generally to the east of this picture. Surrounding businesses include Joe Pine's Builders, the Lake Anna Market, Watson's Mulch and Stone, as well as a motorcycle shop and some real estate offices. This is an image of the GDP, the full site, showing all 3.5 acres in the proposed subdivision of the 1.65 acre portion to accommodate the Dollar General. The remaining 1.88 acres will contain the existing house. There aren't any immediate plans for the house. Well, the immediate plans include interior renovation of the house to allow an office use to go in there. Staff is unaware of any intended planned alterations to the exterior of the house. With the C1 development standards, the remaining parcel is large enough to accommodate additional commercial development, but to date there aren't any plans. Access to the property would be from Route 208 and Fenton Road with a shared access point serving the Dollar General store for any future commercial development on that remaining portion of the property. The shared access point is consistent with the county's comp plan goals for interparcel connections. The Dollar General store is expected to generate 528 vehicle trips per day, and this alone does not trip warrants for a right turn lane. As I noted during the Planning Commission hearing, there were concerns raised about traffic getting off of 208 onto the site, so the applicant has addressed those concerns by adding the 200-foot taper. This is a zoomed-in view of the GDP and the development of the Dollar General site. As you can see, the store is a 9,000 square foot store identified there in blue. Note the 200-foot taper along the frontage of the property in orange. And note that the parking lot design with the larger parking area on the side of the building provides a better aesthetic to the site from Route 208. The required landscaping is shown in green, as well as there's some landscaping out here on the front that is not highlighted in this area here, but that would be a transitional screening 3. These are the elevations that are for the site that are proffered. As you can note, the building will consist of hardy plank siding with a standing seam metal and a brick veneer. It's probably at about a height of 4 foot with the brick veneer there. This is the proffered sign elevation. The height will be an 8-foot monument sign. And also the proffers note that any signage on the property would also be of monument style, in addition to the Dollar General signage. As I stated, the applicant has submitted proffers as part of the request. A common proffer is that the construction will be in conformance with the GDP and the renderings submitted, and also as noted that the signage on the property, in addition to the Dollar General signage, will be of a monument style. Key findings in favor: the Dollar General will provide shopping convenience within the county for Lake Anna area. There was an increase in tax revenue from the proposed site. It's consistent. The design is consistent with the county's access management policies. It creates a design standard for the corridor. And the only finding potentially against is the fact that this will be the first national chain to move into the community and could begin to change the rural character somewhat in the area. The proposal is consistent with the land use and vision for the area and is consistent with the existing rural commercial cluster. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the resolution for R16008. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is present to answer any questions if you have any.
There
Also.
any questions from the board?
Yep. And maybe this comes from, be more addressed with the applicant. How many cars can actually get into a 200-foot tapered turn lane?
Well, the taper is not designed like a traditional turn lane. The taper is designed so that cars traveling to the site going west can move out of the travel lane and move into the site. I would say probably 2. And I have an image of a traditional turn lane I can show you so you can see the difference if you'd like to see that. From a traditional turn lane. Okay.
I bring this up because, you know, at Station 2, where I was last stationed with the fire department, you know, you might as well stop on 208 and make your right-hand turn because that little bit of taper does nothing for that large truck to turn in.
Sure. So see, what you have on the image on the screen now is an image of a traditional turn lane with storage. So your taper begins here in the dashed area here, and then this area here would be your stacking or storage space for your turning movement here. So essentially what the applicant has proposed is to do a 200-foot taper, which would essentially allow traffic to pull, say this truck instance, to pull off of the out of the traveling lane and pull into the site.
Okay.
Any other questions? I just have one. Why a rezoning and not a special use permit?
Well, the use is not permitted in the district by special use.
Okay. Is that unique to Livingston?
No. It's the zoning classification.
So when there's a new store out on Route 3 that used a special use permit that seems very similar to this?
Well, typically if a store requires a special use permit, if it's convenience storage, it's typically for the gas pumps.
No, this wasn't. You know what I'm talking about, the one against opposite Lick Run? It's Amish.
Oh, I think that was...
Yeah, there's no gas station there.
Right, but I think that was through rezoning as well.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board? Okay, I guess the applicant has 10 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Kerry Hutcherson. I'm the attorney for Par 5 Development Group, LLC. And here tonight, just give a general overview of how the store will benefit the county and its residents. Talk a little bit about comprehensive plan conformance. We've got our engineer, Mark Williams, here. He can help answer any questions that folks have on the design aspects of this project. And we also have Zach Ivy right here from Par 5 Development Group if you have questions about the developer. I probably don't need to add too much more to the wonderful staff presentation that was just made. I think a lot of what I would have said is covered there. And we do accept the staff and Planning Commission's recommendation for approval of this case. I would like to just make a couple of additional points, though, in terms of benefits to the locality, specifically with respect to increased real estate tax revenues and business opportunities for local contractors. Every time one of these stores is constructed, there's over $1 million worth of construction materials and work that goes into that store. And that not only increases the value of the property and generates higher tax revenues for the county, but also provides some opportunities for local contractors. And this is because Par 5 operates as the general contractor for these stores that they build for Dollar General. And they put a high priority on hiring from local contractors wherever possible. So that's something that just want to make sure everyone understood and was aware of. It's a benefit to the local community here. The store is going to provide citizens with an easy way to get everyday items at reasonable prices without having to travel long distances outside the county to get them. It's something that has served communities very well, and it's something that, due to our work with the staff in making sure that this architectural design and site design is done in a attractive and a convenient way as far as managing traffic safety and so forth. I think we'll develop a really high quality product for you here. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'd respectfully ask that you approve this rezoning request, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Mr. Sabula.
Yes, the local businesses that were concerned at your hearing, what is the proximity to this location?
There's one just down the road to the, I'm trying to look on the map right now to refresh my memory on which direction is which. This way. It's a gas station and convenience store. That one's the closest one. Now, in terms of direct competition, Dollar General doesn't sell gasoline, and Dollar General really does not view convenience stores as direct competition. They serve a different market. There are certain stores, other discount stores, Family Dollar and so forth, that certainly would, Rite Aid, CVS, that would be considered direct competition. But in terms of your average convenience store with a gas station, that's something that Dollar General has found they can coexist with, and both businesses can continue to serve their markets that they have.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. Amy, has anybody signed up to speak?
Yes, sir. The first speaker is George Cartuti, followed by Jean Loncourt.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members of Spotsylvania County. My name is George Cartuti. I live at 6274 Courthouse Road in Spotsylvania, Virginia. I've been a county resident citizen since 1988. I'm here in opposition of the Dollar General, especially for that section of Spotsylvania County. Livingston District is a very rural area. I'd like to see it like that more, but unfortunately, as time goes by, we may not see that. I am part of a small family business out that way, which is located approximately 3.3 miles away from where this Dollar General is going to be built. But I can't express much more than what I can say. The majority of you will vote the way you need to vote, and I thank you for your time. You all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Jean Loncourt.
Good evening, Chairman and Board of Supervisors. My name is Gene Landcor. I'm the pastor of Good Hope Baptist Church, just down the street from this proposed site. I came here in April of this year. It is my first experience in Spotsylvania County. I came from the peninsula of Virginia, down there in the Yorktown, Hampton, Newport News area, where everything is at your convenience. You can go to a Walmart within 10 to 15 minutes. You can be at a mall within 10 to 15 minutes. 7-Elevens are just around the corner, and restaurants are in quite amount of availability. When we arrived here in April of this year, we noticed that that is not like it here in the county. For the first time in our lives, we realized that if you want to go to Walmart, it's 20 to 25 minutes. If you want to go to some of the finer restaurants, you drive 20 to 25 minutes. Everything is pretty much 20 to 25 minutes. Even the interstate is 20 to 25 minutes. So when I heard that Dollar General was coming into the area, I thought that maybe that might be a good idea. It would kind of alleviate some of this 20 to 25 minute time frame. But then I also noticed that when I saw the original proposal that you did a couple months ago, the tax revenues that would be supported by them coming in would also be taken in the negative sense by the reduction of the businesses that they will affect. Dollar General says that they do not work in direct competition against the convenience stores. My question to Dollar General is, although they don't sell gas, do they sell alcohol? If they don't sell gas, do they sell cigarettes? You see, these convenience stores, they don't make their money off of the gas. The gas is mostly a losing item. It is an item to get somebody to stop to come in to purchase something inside the store. They don't make their money by the selling of the gas. They make their money by people coming into the store and buying the cigarettes and buying the lottery tickets and buying the alcohol, buying the beer, buying the chips, buying the bread. That's where they make their money at. So although Dollar General says they're not in direct competition, I beg to differ with them. They are. On the other hand, there is a Dollar General just over the bridge. It is in Louisa County, and I kind of wonder how many people from Spotsylvania County go to Louisa County to go to the Dollar General. In the 3 months my wife and I have been here, we've never been into that Dollar General. We go to Louisa County to go to the food line, but sometimes we'll go to the food line also in Spotsylvania County. My whole point is Dollar General really may not be the best fit for that county in that specific spot. Maybe there's something else that we could put on that piece of land that will bring tax revenues without decreasing the tax revenues from the convenience stores that will probably start to shut down when they open up. He says, well, the Lake Anna Market is just down the road. No, sir. The Lake Anna Market is right next door. There is another convenience store right down on Lawyers Road. It would negatively impact that one also.
Sir, if you would please sum up, your time has expired.
Yep. So my point is maybe Dollar General just isn't the right fit. To be able to go commercial is good, but maybe Dollar General may not be the right fit for the county at that specific place in the county. Thank you.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody that didn't sign up to speak that would like to speak at this time?
Mary Lou Collier, Mr. Skinner's district. Although I don't live in this particular district, I'm talking as a consumer that I would relish the fact of a Dollar General coming close to my living quarters where I wouldn't have to travel so far to pick up items, and I can guarantee you the price that you pay at Dollar General will be a whole lot cheaper than you would pay at a gasoline convenience. So you got to think of price and convenience for the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that did not sign up to speak that would like to speak at this time? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. The applicant, you have 5 minutes if you'd like it.
I'll just respond to a couple of those comments quickly. First of all, that as far as the commercial competition goes, I want to remind everyone of a point that we sort of skated over earlier when we were just talking about the comprehensive plan. And the county's comprehensive plan does recommend retail sales use and commercial use in this area, on this site. And it doesn't say what kind of retail sales use, or Dollar General versus a convenience store, whatever. And why would it? I mean, that's typically not the role of that type of planning document. And furthermore, it's really not the role of zoning. And that's something that the Virginia Supreme Court has recognized. There's cases that deal with this very issue where there's a zoning case, there was an existing business, and the rezoning would allow for a new business that may or may not compete with the existing business, but the Supreme Court said you can't let that be what you base your zoning decision on, protecting another business. So, again, I'll reiterate, we're not trying to put people out of business. And also, as far as the gas station sales maybe not being the main thing people buy, it is what draws people in. Dollar General doesn't have that draw. So people will go to the gas station to get their gas, and while they're there, they'll pick up whatever they want to pick up from the convenience store. The Dollar General won't be competing for that type of business.
Any other discussion or questions from the board? Mr. Patton.
Well, this has been a dilemma of mine, and with the few complaints that I've received, mostly against the Dollar General, and it's only been a handful. I'll just let you know that. The Supreme Court has already said we cannot, dictate what type of business we bring in as far as its competition with others and whether it will hurt somebody's business or not. We can't make a judgment on that. And as much as I would like to see Spotsylvania, at least the Livingston district, remain rural like it is, that's why my family at least chose to live out there, is that we have the peace and quiet. I can look up and see the stars in the skyline, and the beautiful sunsets. I don't have to fight a bunch of lighting from street lights and other businesses. I drive anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes into town to do my business. Although I do go into Louisa some, and that's very little. I try to do all my business in Spotsylvania County. And the applicant's correctly, as far as the zoning, we can't pick and choose, unfortunately, and no disrespect to y'all. So what businesses come and go in Spotsylvania County, and this was, the comprehensive plan was formed long before I was on this board. I had nothing to do with it, and again, that's just some of the reasoning behind them being able to come into Spotsylvania County and do their business. It'd be like somebody coming to your property and wanting to buy, and just like with the property itself, they have the right to come and buy property all they want, the development group. If somebody's wanting to buy your property and you need that money, you want the county telling you, no, this person can't, but yes, this person can. I don't think that's where we want to go. And hopefully we'll never go. So with that said, just wanted to make some clarifications, make sure the citizens out there, at least in Livingston, the few that I've heard from against this establishment, maybe they'll understand a little better. And I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Any other discussion? Call to question.
And that's with the proffers that have been offered.
With the proffers given.
6 yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Mark, I believe that's time to adjourn. Anything else?
One more,
Okay.
two more
Oh,
items,
that's right.
Mr. Chairman. Number one, under informational matters, I had, there is some information that's been circulated by Mr. Cole regarding the strategic plan discussion, and I think there was an element or two of that he was coveting feedback, if there is any. Mark?
Yeah, I sent you all, the board an email regarding strategic plans, various plans that the county, different departments already have, and of course our comprehensive plan. And then a couple of examples of strategic plans from other counties. And also I worked with Mr. Taylor to kind of draft up a one-page strategic plan based on one of those examples for the county, just for you all to look at. Also included information on the current mission statement and values for the county that I believe was adopted almost a decade ago by a previous board. So all that's information that you all have, and I'd appreciate any thoughts or guidance from you all as you review those.
I have nothing else. Carl?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I would respectfully request a motion to authorize me as county attorney to engage outside counsel in the matter of the Zoan Baptist Church versus Spotsylvania County, currently pending in the Eastern District of Virginia Federal Court, pursuant to any coverage which would be afforded by VACORP, which covers the county.
So moved.
Any discussion? Call to question.
I made a mistake. I meant to say hit yes. I didn't.
Could you reset? Let's revote that. Okay. Call to question.
Apologize.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
6 yes.
Yes.
Okay. Call to question.